I thought I was going into the shade, not into the sun.
Hi everybody and welcome. Marc Cook with Kitplanes magazine for our Build to Fly segment. We're here at the Redbird Pavilion. Thanks to Redbird for helping us support this program, and thanks to you guys for watching. It's been an exciting first day of OSH, believe it or not. I'm here with Marc Becker, who's the head of the Aviation division, aircraft division. We almost got that right at Rotax. And it seems like Rotax has been everywhere lately. When you look around at some of the new models that have come out and some of the airplanes that have been re-engined, it's a lot of activity in Rotax. So you guys have been busy, clearly it's been successful. Why do you think you've been that successful? What's sort of the key to what makes you guys fly, so to speak?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. I think it's a big part of that is having so many different OEMs installing the engine. You always try to find a good compromise. And I think what we learned over the years is really listen to what the OEMs needed. And having that baseline lightweight engine actually helped to cater a lot of that in that engine segment. And I think we just had it right, listening at the right time to the right persons, and actually turning that into engines for people who actually pretty much love it.
I think that's fair to say. And two, what's happening is with the 916, has that got a Rotax in it or no?
Maybe 582 something. Maybe.
Next generation Rotax. Yeah. You heard it here first. So obviously with the 916 gaining the extra 20 horsepower, that has opened up a lot of opportunities.
Like this one.
I like that. A lot of opportunities for airframes that maybe weren't on board. So how does that play into your strategic planning?
Well, what it does help, obviously, and you're right, it's actually what really played in our field is already with the 940, 950, we tried to prove that you could use these engines on a four-seater airplane. Yet, obviously, you have people thinking differently because they expect that all time, like at least 40 to 50 horsepower per passenger and like that. But I think already Sling started proving it quite a bit. The 915 even more so, which also was in the Sling and kind of helped a lot. And I think the 960 was just the next step where we really got to the point that now we can really prove it. It's even sport in a four-seater, it's even more sport in a two-seater. It's great for a gyro, even with payload. And I think that kind of played out very well for us.
So the 916 is, like I said, a big jump in horsepower. I think a lot of people look at the package and they go, well, the 915 and 916 are kind of the same engine, but that's not the case. So what's different between the two, top line?
Yeah, well, from the outside it does look like the same engine. Obviously it's the same basis. The main change we had, which is obvious, is the calibration, which doesn't go that to that same altitude, like this. Obviously provides that extra horsepower on takeoff and more fuel efficiency in cruise. So, in order to do that, obviously from the experience we have with the 950, we already had some learning. So there is actually about 4 dozen improvements, but it's all inside. So that's why from the outside it doesn't show. I mean, to name a major one, the gearbox is a different one. There's internal beefing up on the pistons, on the com rods, on the crankshaft, all that to really make sure we get to that TBO with that higher horsepower.
I think it's significant that you not only increase the horsepower, but you increase the TBO over the 915. That must have taken a lot of development work to get there.
Yes, obviously at the end you need to prove for yourself and your customers, but you also need to prove your authority. It does help to have an engine out there which is very similar and already had all that experience. You had tens of thousands of hours already out in the field, and then just running it up, taking it. So taking these engines who already ran to 1200 and then taking them back, inspect them, then run them up to 2000, 2500 and even more to prove that was the next natural stop, and that kind of helped us to go to the 2000 TBO right out of the box.
That's good. So Rotax obviously is a global company that plays into a global market. So fuels is an issue certainly today in the US, and probably fuels availability worldwide is an issue. How does that inform your design and manufacturing?
Well, it is even a big topic for us. I mean, we're not so much concerned on the avgas versus non-leaded fuel because we can run them both. Still, we see the impact on the industry. But it's further developments as well, because we can run on MoGas, but there's a different control on automotive gas than there is on the aviation fuel. And just to name one example, ethanol content is a big time. We allow up to 10% ethanol, but Brazil uses up to 20 something. India's already above 10%, so obviously that's also something we need to consider.
Welcome to Oshkosh.
Yes. So that does play a big role whenever you look into it. Can we actually run it on higher ethanol contents? How much can we make sure that the engine is less susceptible to different quality standards of fuel that you will have out there once you start getting MoGas from a less controlled environment?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to note that it's not just the mechanical part of the engine we're talking about, but I think what enables the horsepower and the tolerance for different fuels is the electronics package, the ECU. How much time do you guys spend developing that? Is that a big part of your R&D?
It is an ever-growing part of the R&D. I think it's pretty much similar to what you see in the car industry, where the base engine pretty much doesn't change that much because the physics is pretty known. There's slight improvements over time. The big improvements really lie in the electronics. How quick... Just in case somebody's wondering, are we really in Oshkosh?
We're really in Oshkosh.
We are.
Absolutely.
So yes, they do play a more and more important part, because now the modern electronics has so much capability and possibility to control the engine even more tighter, which allows you to go more to a limit on the engine because you have the sensors realizing that part and then taking care of it.
So a big part of that electronic control is simplifying for the pilot. Obviously taking mixture control out of the equation. How important is that to the OEMs, and how important is that to the pilots who fly these? Is that really one of those killer features, as they say?
Well, talking of the pilots, you always know we have these two different breeds of pilots, these old kind of style pilots where we want to have 10. They either want a big lever like this, or they want 10 levers to deal with. There's also an ever-growing part of... But obviously there's a growing part of young pilots coming into, they don't want to deal with all of that. They're really happy to have, not to have mixture control. I mean, an automatic propeller control would be the next obvious step. And even going down to on engine startup to do all the procedures, test procedures. That's something we surely have on our to-do list to simplify that even more. But at the end of the day, you're getting more into that car industry type and taking off the pilots the load you think the pilot doesn't really need, because he's there for other things which are more important than running the engine.
So we're going to get to the point where you put the key in, press the button, and the engine starts itself?
I guess it's a few years out, but ideally that's what we're working towards.
Yeah. So I know we talked a lot about the growth for Rotax, yeah, and the 916. We're seeing a lot of airplanes that are built sort of around the 900, let's call it the 900 series engines. I think, you know, the traditional aircraft engines had been so dominant for so long, but now we're seeing a lot of airplanes designed with this footprint in mind. How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes us very proud, but it is also a big responsibility, because you need to make sure whenever you come up with an engine, you know they're going to design around it. So you want to make sure you get the best fit of whatever they envision to do. So yes, you're proud on seeing that, and you see all the cowling, and from the cowling you see it's on Rotax inside, but at the same time it always gives you that homework to say, hey, we got so many OEMs now, so whenever we come up with something different, we better make sure it really fits, and it fits their ideas. So it's for us, we homework to understand all of these different ideas and trying to make the best compromise in terms of what's the engine for it.
Absolutely, and of course the power to weight ratio helps a lot. You can design an engine that's narrow, or you can design an airframe that's narrow.
Yeah.
And of course the fuel efficiency helps a lot too.
Yeah.
I have a question about the manufacturing side. So we're hearing a lot about supply chain issues, and certainly some of the manufacturers, not just in engines, but across the industry have been having that. How does Rotax approach that, and do you have enough sort of embedded that you're a little protected from that, or is that still an issue?
Well, truth to be told, especially during COVID, we did get hit. I think it's fair to say. I think our benefit is, and that's where it comes handy to be in a big corporate, we do a couple 100,000 engines a year. So obviously there's a different approach to how you deal with your supplier, and you have somewhat of a different level to make sure you still get the parts. Aside that, obviously we also through COVID went through that learnings that, especially on critical items, you either start doing it in-house, or you make sure you don't do that just in time anymore that much.
Yeah.
You don't optimize it, you don't over-optimize it, you're trying to get a handoff, and let's make sure we at least got in a sufficient amount of parts back in the stock. And I think the second part, which helped big time for us, is since we sell everything for distribution systems, and the distributor are required to have a certain amount of stock, which usually goes anything between at least 3 to 6 months in advance. That obviously helped a lot in softening out that kind of backlog facing that we had, because we always had a little more master playing around with the engines we had, and kind of softened it out.
So it sounds like you're kind of approaching it from a lot of different angles. And of course, volume does help. Has Rotax's business, I'm not asking for the raw numbers, but in general terms, how has the growth been over the last decade?
It's been pretty good. I mean, we did see a hit in COVID, to be fair, but while everybody was expecting that to really be a big hit, we didn't see the big hit. Quite the opposite was the time. Apparently people had time, especially on the kids builder side. So actually it skyrocketed right at the mid-start of COVID, actually down to the point where we had trouble actually producing the numbers we've been asked for. And we still see that high numbers. Now we start seeing a little slowdown, especially in terms of a backlog on the OEM side, but it's still a pretty strong market, and I guess it's still a good market for us to be in.
Yeah. Well, certainly that is growing, and I think if you guys should choose to move up in the horsepower range, that's certainly some other opportunities. I'm also curious about developing new airframes is really a hand-in-hand relationship with the engine manufacturer, and traditionally the Lycomies and the Continentals work very closely with the the Cessnas and the Pipers. How is that relationship with, say, Cub Crafters and Kitfox and some of those manufacturers who are, implementing new engines for you?
That's something actually we kind of learned from the way the Lycomics and Continentals did it. They have a little bit of a different setup. Most of their engines are into existing airframes, not so much into the new ones. For us, it was the complete opposite for a long, long time, and still is quite. At the same time, we have a lot of different OEMs, so the finding that right compromise for all that OEMs has always been a big topic for us. And over the last years, especially coming up with the 915 and now with the 916, we developed that to a new level for us to be much more integrated in their early design on. And I think you mentioned a Cupcraft has been the perfect example where early on we had an OEM who knew exactly what he wanted to, how he envisioned the engine to look like, which was a big help for us because we knew, okay, that's how we do it, and that will be a perfect fit then. And I guess the result proves the right approach. Excellent.
Well, Marc, thank you for your time today. It's been a great talk. Jets notwithstanding, you know you're at Oshkosh when there's jet noise.
Yeah, that's right.
So Rotax has got a huge display here, so if you're on site, come say hi to them. I'm sure you have some tech people who can answer some questions.
Oh, yes.
Got some interesting airplanes out there. And speaking of the 916, we're going to go take a look at the Sling TSI and the High Wing. We had a chance to catch up with those guys. They brought a couple of airplanes from Southern California to Oshkosh that they're going to show off, that's at the booth right now. We'll get a little more background on the development and how those airplanes are performing.